Around the world, a new kind of entrepreneur is rising, driven not by profit, but by purpose. Today, you'll meet one of their leaders. Stay tuned to hear from my special guest, founder and director of Faith Driven Entrepreneur, on this week's TGIF at Work podcast. How do I bring my faith to work? How do I tap into the power of God in my work-life call? Why am I going through this adversity? Is God mad at me? I'm Oz Hillman, and I've been helping leaders like you answer these questions and more for over 30 years. That's what this podcast is all about. Let's learn and grow together. Welcome to TGIF, Today God is First. Well, welcome everybody to this week's TGIF at Work podcast. It is a very special treat that I have with me today, a special guest. Justin Forman is Executive Director of Faith Driven Entrepreneurship and Faith Driven Investor. And I've known Justin for many, many years. He's best known really years ago when, what was the group that you started? I just went blank.
Fun.
Right Now Media, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey. A lot of different entrepreneurial dots along the way, but yeah, I think we first connected years ago when we were starting Right Now Media and just watching what God was doing through that. There was a website that we had started, I think, around the time called Businesses Mission Network, and that was me in my 20s really learning about this conversation and this movement for the first time. But it's been fun over the years to be connected and trailblazers and people like yourself and others that have just really opened up this conversation that allows us to step into the moment that we're in right now.
Yeah, we've all watched this movement over the years, and it's amazing. I think I pinpointed it around 1998 where we began to really see things surface in the marketplace, and we started seeing media cover it and so forth. And Right Now Media was a great tool for churches to get more, learn about training, and you were a pioneer in that, and you are the ultimate entrepreneur yourself with owning several businesses yourself. And but today we want to let our audience know about what is Faith Driven Entrepreneur. We were talking about the fact that this started around 7 years ago, and what really led for you even thinking this way and thinking about a need like this.
Well, I think it connects back to some of the conversation that we were just having about how old is this movement? Like, what's its birthday? And our team has just finished working on this fun piece that really shows that this is a conversation that's been around for, hundreds of years and really paying respect to the incredible work to that. Maybe we'll put a link to it in the show notes here, but like, there's just a fun story that we get to stand on this moment. But I think you're right that there was something resurgent in the late 90s where all of a sudden this faith and work conversation resurfaced, maybe fresh wind, and kind of what happens. I think we're at another one of those hinge moments where faith and work, through the faithfulness of so many, and to include even pastors and entrepreneurs and media and a lot of things, has gotten us to a place where it's now normative to have this conversation. We were just doing this survey with Barna, which some of your listeners might be familiar with, in their research report for the church, that has said that most entrepreneurs today realize that they've been given this for a reason and for a purpose. I mean, it's staggering what the numbers are. When you survey it, now granted, most of the people responding to this survey are people inside of the church, but at numbers of like 70, 80, 90%, people are saying, hey, I feel called to this for a reason. But in the same notion to that, you still find a majority of those very same people that feel called say that they struggle with how.
Mm.
And I think that that defines the moment that we're in is
Mm.
20 years ago, it was, if you care about faith and work and business, get involved. But today, there's a difference with the how. Now, that's not any different to the history of the church. When you look at church, I mean, we minister to single teenagers, adults, people different from married couples or couples with kids or families with kids. It's all different. And I think that that's what we're in this conversation is to say that serving and partnering with an entrepreneur is different from somebody that might be on the front lines of a small business or on the front lines of the workforce. And it's not better. We want to clarify that up front. It's just different. I often think that when I'm in church on Sunday morning, The thing I might struggle with is probably caring too much about work. I think that's an entrepreneur's challenge. Like they see their identity so closely attached to it and it's hard to separate. But I think a lot of times the faith and work conversation has been known for trying to get people to care about their work when they might not. And I get it. If you're working that 8 to 5 and this, that, and whatever, it might be a different challenge that you face. So I think we're in this moment that really steps into this idea that if we're going to help people really apply this, and certainly we want to be a movement and a conversation known by not just thinking differently, but acting differently, that we're going to have to understand the nuances of the how. And so, faith driven entrepreneur and faith driven investor, and this even ministry that we have for teenagers to help to understand their calling in early stages of entrepreneurship, it's really all designed with that idea in mind. How do you stop people? How do you help them understand the way that God's called them, invite them into this wonderful journey, this upside down adventure, but then helping them understand how that looks differently for each of them. And so, we come to it with a focus on entrepreneurs, people that are ministering and leading teams that we think are uniquely positioned, much in the way that a pastor is in a church, where they have access to the microphone, they have access to the levers of culture, and they can really shape things in a big way. So, faith-driven entrepreneur is really, really focused to that end, and I'd say it's in many ways a new chapter of kind of a faith and work conversation, but it's a focused one. Really saying, what does it look like to reach these leaders and influencers there in the marketplace?
Yeah. And so, from a practical standpoint, when you come in contact with a uh, entrepreneur, what is the message you have for them and how you can help them?
I think that's a great question. I think one of the things is like, what's the pain point? What's the entrepreneur struggling with today? And, U.S. Surgeon General and other people have well documented loneliness, both in our society at large. I think that that's compounded when you talk about the entrepreneur. When you talk about loneliness in society, tech, everything, it's distanced us, it's spread us out. But then when you think about the journey of the entrepreneur, it's compounded because, man, they go to church and oftentimes don't feel like people understand them. Even in faith and work circles, they don't always feel understood. The pressures of leading, the pressures of payroll, the pressures of all of that, they're oftentimes feeling like they have to keep up an impression, whether that's even in their church, in their community, or even in their own home, trying to say, no, this venture is going to be worth it. I promise, kids, I promise. Whoever it is, their spouse, that's just saying like it's going to be worth it. Now, so I think there's a loneliness that's there. So that's one of the first things of what we try to really step into and solve. And so, I think the first thing that we try to do is we often say that content is kind of the edgy reframing. We're trying to provoke people. We don't tell Hallmark stories because we know those aren't true in entrepreneurship. So we try to find that edge. If an entrepreneur is kind of thinking those deep pain points and thoughts in their mind, how do we use content, media, stories of entrepreneurs to stop people? And then a line we use often is, if you come for the content, how do you stay for the community? And so, as you alluded to, we started this idea 7, 8 years ago, but really there was a moment 4 years ago when we created a course and said, hey, people need a place to think their confusion out loud. And there's wonderful ministries like C12 and others that are out there. But there was a gap. There's a gap between somebody watching a video and being able to be at a place and scale where they can pay for something like a CEO network like that. So, through the generosity of some people and some wonderful volunteers and some team that rolled up our sleeves, we started these online or in-person groups. And so over the last 4 years, there's probably been over 20,000 entrepreneurs that have gone through a course. And I think it's their first step to thinking that confusion out loud. And it's that first chance for them to really say, gosh, there's other people out here struggling and going through this. And so it's an 8-week course from video stories around the world, some teaching from friends like JD Greer and Henry Kastner, of course, that really just kind of ground into some core principles of what does this look like. And it has just been a treat to see people connect with that. It's been the net promoter score, if you're familiar with NPS, is off the charts. We've experienced like an 85 to 90 net promoter score, which To put that in perspective, many of your fast food restaurants or even places you like are in that 40s and 50s. So to be off of that, I think it really speaks to it's hitting that loneliness button and saying, here's a place to think that confusion out loud. And I think it's the other thing that it makes it accessible. I mean, it's crazy to think 5 years ago, if I would have told you we're going to have a small group that's going to meet on Zoom, first of all, we'd say, what is Zoom? And second, we'd be saying, I don't know that that's really community. But in the busy life of entrepreneurs, we're not saying that this is the same thing as family or that church group that you're a part of, but it's a step in that direction. And I think that accessibility piece is another thing that it's been fun to see what God's doing with that.
Do you do anything in a physical realm and in meetings for leaders?
Great question. It's something that we want to do more of. We've started to do it in little pieces whenever we're in places. We're traveling. We're always crisscrossing really the world, filming stories, trying to bring those to life. And along the way, we do meetups and events. We probably anticipate here in the next couple of years doing more of that in person. We have an event coming up here in September, and every September we have it. And it's called the Faith Driven Entrepreneur Conference, and it's streamed typically to about 300 different locations around the world. There's now groups meeting in about 130 different countries.
Hmm.
And really, the heartbeat behind this, it was born out of the times of COVID and everything moved online. But really, what's beautiful is how God worked through that to say, we wanted to create an event that empowered people to be that leader of the movement in their backyard and not take, the 400, 500 best leaders of the movement and bring them to one place. And so, really, it showed us a model of serving. Like, what does it mean to serve a local group and to really come behind them? And so, it's been a gift to see how the content sets the table, 3 hours of conversation and content, breaking that up. It really brings like a world-class nature of the content and then a localized expression of conversation together. And so it's been fun to see that. So typically in a fall, 4 or 5 thousand people will show up at these watch parties. Thousands more might view the content online. But it's really been a fun thing to see how these local communities are rallying. And so it's, a group of leaders here in Dallas or wherever it might be. You see 200 people gathered together in the Philippines, and you're like, man, that's the beautiful thing about it. It's a community now that's growing, and the just nature of this movement being that is it's fun to see.
When we use the term entrepreneur versus business owner, uh,
Mm.
C12 is one of the largest groups out there that serves CEOs along with Convene. I've served on the board of Convene for the last 5 years and just dropped off. But how would you define the difference, or is there a difference between entrepreneur and business owner? And what would you see the difference is between those organizations and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've been huge fans of C12. Love the work of what Mike does there and what Greg does with Convene. Phenomenal work. When I was 20 years ago, graduating as a student from Baylor, I loved it. I found out about C12 first, then later found out about Convene, and thought, man, what incredible groups are there? And it has been fun to see. I think there's a correlation in terms of the growth. Mike and I talk about this of when Faith Driven Entrepreneur has grown and when it launched in groups and when C12 has grown. Certainly the leadership of Mike and the team and the way that they're doing is just world class. I think it's a fun thing to see the more noise that hopefully Faith Driven Entrepreneur kind of kicks up with some of this content and groups that we certainly hope more people find their way to those groups. What I would say is like faith-driven entrepreneur groups today, it's that first step. It might be that more accessible step for a lot of people. Oftentimes, Mike and I talk about this, maybe 80, 90% of people that inquire about something like C12 are unfortunately just not in a position financially or maybe time, or they haven't matured enough as a business to really step into it. And something like this, that's 8 weeks, it's free, it's accessible, oftentimes
Wow.
hosted by your church, is really one of those ways that it enables people to take that first kind of safe step. And so I think that's one of the big things of what we want to be known for is the accessibility of it. Our goal is really to, the hope and prayer that Henry and I both have is that this would feed the movement and just ways that would help other people step into the conversation. So I think a lot of times people start with a free course like that, and it lights some things up. And certainly we know that some people from that think, okay, how do I find a group in person near me? And maybe it's at I'm a this scale or whatever it is in leading that business. And so I think it works really well in complement. I think online is also another part to what we do. And it allows people to say, even amidst the busy day, if you might not be able to dedicate, a full day to it, anybody can take a 90-minute Zoom call. And to being able to do that really helps kind of crack that seal of a first step.
You know, right now, media, which was the thing you were involved in before, was very huge in really cracking the door open for the whole faith at work inside the local church and doing
Mm.
more video in that area. When you look at the local church, what progress have you seen made in the last 10 to 15 years of churches understanding that men and women in the workplace actually have a ministry besides just writing a check to the local church?
Yeah, I know this is a big passion area for many in the movement, right? And this is a conversation you and I have had over the years. And I'm incredibly encouraged. I think there's a lot of pain and hurt that we all steward just through life moments of feeling overlooked and passed over. And entrepreneurs carry that, pastors carry that too. But a year ago, we did that research report that I referenced earlier with the Barna Group, and it has been a joy to work with David Kinnaman and the team and really understand this moment that we're in. And I think that there's a wave right underneath the surface. I'd like to think that, as you said, right now media was a source of content that maybe went into a church. Maybe you could look at it as an old school cable TV lineup, and work had a place in that lineup in a way that it hadn't before. And so there was a channel on the content that people could discover and realize, oh my goodness, there is something that's happening here. I think today, when you survey pastors, there is a hunger and there's a recognition that, similar to the entrepreneurs, this has to be talked about. The question just becomes how. And so we held an event last year. It was called Pastors and Entrepreneurs, and we're going to hold it again this year in March. Similar mindset, an online streamed event. 1,700 people attended the event last year, and it was just fun to see. I mean, just that alone. I mean, if you and I would have said 10 years ago that 1,700 people would attend an event, pastors and entrepreneurs, or pastors and ministry leaders would be coming to learn about this, we'd have been called crazy. Like, that just didn't happen. It's happening now for a multitude of reasons. For one, we look at the headlines and you can see entrepreneurs are shaping society. We used to have to point back to like the early days of, Columbus and other things to show like its effect on society. But today, you can look for the money that we might use, the rockets, the whatever it is, the self-driving cars, and know that entrepreneurs are affecting society. And I think that the church is coming around to that, specifically pastors. I think of these podcasts that we're going to be doing here soon with ministry leaders. There are several of them that have said, hey, they'd love to tell their story. I think of Zach and Jenny Allen telling their story about how obviously we know Jenny and the work that she's done in ministry. But what's fun is their kids are stepping into a different era of ministry. So their son is recognizing that potential as an entrepreneur. You look at the Cottons, you look at Larry Cotton, their story, and then you look at their boys and Dude Perfect and how they've seen a new era of ministry in that form of entrepreneurship. And I think you're seeing that across the church, and it's one of those things that people haven't been able to put words to, but we're stepping into that moment. So one of the things that we've had a great joy of doing here these last couple of months is 4 months ago, we started a network of churches that we said, hey, what does it look like to come together to share best practices, to learn about some of these things, and really have the tools to step into this how moment. Now, here's where I think is an important thing. I think oftentimes, and when we had this event last year, thousands of people attended. And I remember two conversations distinctly that afternoon after the event had aired. Two people called me up and said, hey, we just watched this with our elders and our pastors, and we're fired up and we want to do something. Now, I think the key here is making sure that we wade into this with a plan or a check we can cash. Because here's what I mean by this. A lot of times I think people over the years saw what happened with Redeemer, or maybe what Tom Nelson and guys did there in Kansas City, and said, great, let's start the Center for Faith and Work. And, da, 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 da. That's a big bite. That's, millions of dollars in terms of a budget that it takes to pull that off. And I think in the same way, pastors are coming to that event. They're walking out of it saying, man, what does it look like to start, 27 different ministries? We're going to have one for the teachers. We're going to have one for the doctors. We're going to have one, and you go down it, right? I think that's a challenge because oftentimes when you start with so many ideas, you get paralyzed and you don't do anything. This is where I think the entrepreneur has a key role. Like everything in life, it's about sequencing. Any entrepreneur knows that, any business leader knows that. You have more ideas than you can execute on that day, so it's about sequence. And I think the church can learn from this in the same moment to say, what does it look like to really mobilize entrepreneurs? Because if you mobilize the entrepreneurs, oftentimes those entrepreneurs represent tons of different industries. And if you galvanize them, they are the ones that self-fund things, lead things, drive things, initiate things, do things. So our bias is that if the gateway to a full understanding at a church level of vocation, we think depends or launches a lot on the entrepreneur and the pastor. Because if that entrepreneur gets fired up, like we just said, they fund the ministries of the church, and we that's a piece of the puzzle we can't ignore. But to your point earlier, we can't, of course, don't stop there. The business itself is ministry, the work itself is ministry, the platform itself is ministry, but it's a holistic nature of those. And I think that makes it a key thing to say if we can engage the entrepreneur first, I think it leads to a healthy, vibrant ecosystem of a faith and work conversation. But if we try to put the pressures on a pastor trying to reach 10 different industries and domains, it's going to sink them. So here's my last thought on this is I think 10 years from now, there's going to be a pastor of entrepreneurship at 2,000 or more churches in the country. I say that just to put a number to it. Most people look at that and they think that's crazy. How's that ever going to happen? I think it's more accessible than we think. Today, you walk around and it's not uncommon to find a 55, 50, 60-year-old man or woman that's exited a business and says, man, I'm financially independent. I play some golf. I've got the grandkids, but I'm a little bit bored and I'm a little bit fatigued of maybe just being the rubber stamp on some boards. And I'd really love to roll up my sleeves and share all the experience that I've had over 20, 30 years.
Hmm.
Well, imagine if a church found a trusted person, a vetted person. Candidly, they already know who they are. They're probably an arm's length away. But what if they put them on the church staff page and said, here's our pastor of entrepreneurship, our community director of entrepreneurship. Just think about how that church could be equipped. Somebody doesn't need a paycheck, they just need a platform. And if churches could create that platform, put a little bit of a role and a title and give it some of that, I think it's going to be amazing to think. So that's just one of those predictions. Maybe it's up there with Baylor football and what I think I'm going to predict for the league season. But I really do believe we're on the edge of a generation of very talented entrepreneurs that have had earlier exits than most because of the tech world that we're in, really being able to give back in a meaningful way.
Well, I know that, and you probably discovered this as well, but it's worth stating for pastors out there that might be watching this. For many years, pastors thought that, well, if I equip my people for them to think that they are a ministry themselves, then it's going to reduce my volunteerism and my giving because they're going to think their own ministry is as important. And the truth is, the exact opposite has happened that when men and women in the workplace, in the church, feel validated for their call to the marketplace, then their heart is changed toward that church because they're being validated and they actually give more and volunteering goes up, not less. Have you found the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to look far to find that, right? I mean, we can look with our kids, we can look in our marriage, we can look in anything. The more you affirm your kids, the more it comes back to you. The more you affirm your spouse, the more it comes back to you. I think we're seeing the exact same thing to your point. There may not be a clear dashboard of measurables, but I think that there's just that abundance versus scarcity mindset. And I think entrepreneurs live in this abundance mindset. They create value every day. And so I think you're exactly right, is that these are some of the most, again, loyal, leading, connected, loyal in a funding sense or whatever you might call it. And I think that this is a group of people in a church that if they feel invested in, poured into, and not an extraction, that they're gonna bring their whole self to it. And so, 100%. I think the way that we would say it is imagine being the church for entrepreneurs in your city. Is that an opportunity? It certainly is. It's an opportunity for strengthening the faith of people that are sitting on the pews of the church, but it's also a bridge to the community and a bridge to very positioned strategic leaders in the community that might not be walking with Jesus. And what does it look like to do that? And so I think that there's a virtuous cycle that is getting set off and people are seeing it. I love Chip. Chip Ingram's a good friend and contributor to this movement and conversation in a lot of different ways. And he says this idea, rarely have I seen a thriving church that in a growing church that doesn't have some sort of ecosystem or some sort of place where business owners feel encouraged and inspired. You look at many of the big churches and growing churches, and I think you find that as the case, is you find a growing group of men and women that feel invested in and they give back in a variety of different ways. And so I think you're right. I think it's this moment that we're more alike than we are different, probably with a lot of entrepreneurs. There are some things that are different in the equation, but there's a lot of things that are similar. And with a little bit of affirming and encouraging of each other, it's fun to see what it sets free.
Now you have another entity, Faith Driven Investor. Tell us about that. What's the uniqueness of that?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking. So, Faith Driven Investor is the same kind of model in terms of how we reach people, content that would stop people, and then similar groups that people can be a part of, where they can say, God has entrusted me with capital, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. I think there's been so much that has been paid attention to, like getting out of debt and the work of Dave Ramsey and other things, and financial stewardship and Crown, and some great work that's been there over the years. I think the question is now moving into when we invest, what do we do with that? What are we investing in? Are we investing in things that can have a redemptive impact? Are we investing in things that can not only bring a financial return, but have a multiple bottom line to it? It's that same multiple bottom line conversation that started 25 years ago in this movement. And it's now into that same area of finance. And so what's fun about this is I think the more that people unlock this idea of that I've been given these resources to steward for a reason, the more that that happens, kind of using that virtuous cycle language, it sets that off in entrepreneurship because many of these entrepreneurs, they need funding. And if they have funding from like-minded capital, yeah, that's a powerful thing. If you've got capital that's trying to pull you in a different direction or pull you away from your values, that's a challenge. And so I think that this community of faith-driven investors and faith-driven entrepreneurs stepping into this moment at this time, it's really fun to see. And so we actually believe, and this is crazy to think it, but Barna Research Report kind of backs some of this stuff up, is that when pastors and entrepreneurs and faith-driven investors kind of all come together, it really is amazing to think what can be unlocked. It's crazy that there was a statistic that I think that when we pulled it, 7 out of 10 people, not just Christians, that believed when entrepreneurs, investors, and pastors come together that truly that some of the world's great problems can be solved. And I think that that's an affirmation and validation of like the problem solvers of today. There still are ministry leaders. There are still people doing incredible things, pastors doing incredible things, but the formula solving these big problems has some new players into the equation, and the entrepreneur and the investor. And when they all come together, it's really, really fun to see that happen. And so, 5, 6 years ago, there wasn't much of an ecosystem of faith-driven investors. But today, there's a vibrant group of a growing number of fund managers and a different host of options that you can invest in real estate that has a mindset of a redemptive return and says, hey, how do we bring chaplaincy into it? And how does that lower turnover, improve results and bottom line? Oh, and does impact. And so you're seeing the case for that made on a ministry sense, on a business sense. And I think you're seeing the same thing now happen even in movies and film. When you think of things like House of David and some of the things of these big blockbuster projects and films that are delivering financial return, but also delivering a great message. And so you see that there, you see that in small to medium-sized companies across the country that are getting capital because they want to do business differently and say, it's actually because of my values that we think that we'll be more durable, more impactful, more sustainable, whatever it might be. So it's fun to see these kind of two twin engines of conversation happening at the same time. And I think the last thought here there with that is, and I think it really speaks to kind of the earlier part of the conversation. 25 years ago, you'd have this conversation of faith and work, and it was, monolithic. Now it's matured enough to say, well, hey, how I speak to you as an entrepreneur is different to speaking to somebody that's a fiduciary of large amounts of capital. And what does it look like to then speak to the unique challenges and opportunities that each person carries in that moment?
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're getting close to our end. Tell people how to get connected with you guys and what's the first step for them.
Yeah, well, I appreciate having this conversation. It's just fun, us to think about just how God's been at work here for 20, 30 years, just in this movement, as you said, the late 90s. And so grateful for your faithfulness. I think for me, when I just remember as an early 20 something, hearing about just the work and conversation and things that was happening, it's just fun to see that it's on the shoulders of those conversations that we stand here. And so it's a gift to steward this in this moment. I think there's ways for people to get involved in a host of different things. For one, if you're just curious to learn about what's happening, just go to the Faith Driven Entrepreneur YouTube channel. There's a podcast that we have in video form. It's kind of like a video TV show that we produce each week that has some of the stories. When I say stories, they're 7 to 8 minute kind of like documentary kind of things from around the world. They're edgy, they're fast paced. We've created some for teenagers to adults, but I think that's a great way just to see what God's doing around the world. And it's really kind of the ESPN highlights of the last couple of decades being able to be captured. And so we've been able to capture some of those.
Say you guys do a great job of reaching that Gen X group with your videos. You're just cutting edge, top quality. So if you've never seen any of their videos, I encourage you to watch them.
Thank you for that encouragement. So yeah, it's been fun, and it's been fun to see the two-way street of those stories. We used to say that content also used to flow from the West to the rest, but the beautiful nature of this movement is that there are entrepreneurs around the world, whether it's Nairobi or Lagos or wherever it might be, that are some of the most consumed stories in here in Dallas and whatever it is. And so it's fun to see the way that the movements complement each other. So that's the first way to connect. The second way, if you go to the Faith Driven Entrepreneur website, you can find any of these groups in 130 different countries meeting online or in person. It's an 8-week conversation. There's no cost or catch to it. Just a great way, facilitated by other leaders in the movement. And if you're listening to this and you're a leader of the movement and you feel like God's entrusted 20, 30 years of experience there and you want to pour back into that next generation, there's a great opportunity to lead those, whether that's online or at your church. And so those would be some ways I would encourage it. If you're an investor, similarly, faithdriveninvestor.org, you can check those things out. But any way of those, we'd like to say, we don't want to be prescriptive, but we do want to be practical, and we want to create some of those ways for people to get involved, and those are a couple of them.
Awesome. Well, Justin, this has been awesome, and you're doing such a great work, and we look forward to seeing how we can promote you guys in more ways. So thanks for being with us today, and we'll have different links you guys can connect to. So thanks for being with us, and God bless.
Amen. Great to be with you. Thanks, Oz.
Let's face it, we all want to make a difference. We want to live for Christ. We want our work to have meaning deep down. We all want to live a larger story to make a difference in the world. But how do we do this? It doesn't just happen. We must invest in our spiritual and professional life that involves spiritual mentoring and training. But where do we go to get that kind of spiritual mentoring and professional training? Is it at church, a conference, a school? The Change Agent Master Mentor Program is the answer to that question, founded by Os Hillman. He is a pioneer in marketplace ministry and has had a 40-year advertising and business career, working with clients like American Express, Steinway Pianos, Thomas Nelson Publishers, and a host of other successful companies. He understands the challenge of living for Christ in a pressure-packed business environment. He created the Change Agent Master Mentor Program to help leaders. Os will help you realize your dream of being successful in your career and having an influence on your world. The Change Agent Master Mentor Program is designed for you to realize your larger story, to understand your purpose, to learn and apply your faith life to your work life from us and other proven workspace leaders who are doing it. Our online course and group mentoring will help you become God's change agent, to be a cultural influencer and succeed in your work-life call, and grow in your relationship with God and with other members of the Change Agent Master Mentor Program. Come join us. Let's influence the world together. www.camastermentor.com